Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or whenever you're watching this. This video is about day-night cycles, so it works whenever you're tuning in.
It is also about the Soulsborne subgenre of games that has been an obsession for so many of us since 2009's Demon's Souls. Some years after that, developer From Software started using day-night cycles in a few different ways. Sometimes it's purely for the narrative, other times it's an actual mechanic that makes a big difference. Let's take a look at some specific games and see how it's done. A day-night cycle is almost self-explanatory. It's when a game uses some sort of internal clock that periodically moves the game world from day to night, and vice versa. This can be used in a variety of ways, with the most common events being enemies that only come out at night, or NPCs that are only up during the day. Of course, From Software did not invent this mechanic. That honor usually goes to Pokemon Gold and Silver, which ran on a true 24-hour clock that caused the lighting to change and brought out different nocturnal Pokemon for players to catch. It even determined whether Eevee evolved into Umbreon or Espeon. These days, the cycle is a huge part of open world games, which is why From Software put particular effort into making Elden Ring move through different times of day. But that wasn't the first time we've seen the studio try it. 2015's Bloodborne is the first From Software title we're gonna talk about today, or tonight, or whenever you're watching this.
I already made that joke, didn't I? Check out the cool shirt.
In this case, Bloodborne's cycle is purely for the vibes, as it mixes up the narrative and aesthetics. The game puts players through a hunt that runs throughout the night, moving from early evening into the dawn of a new day. Maybe calling it a night-day cycle would fit better here, although the most accurate name would be moon cycles. When you first arrive in Yharnam, it's just before sunset, so the moon isn't quite out yet. But the people sure are. There's a whole blood-starved mob that you have to face as the game's first big challenge. The sun continues to set as we encounter Father Gascoigne, the gatekeeper for the rest of the game's difficult boss fights.
Too proud to show your true face, eh?
It's not until we defeat Vicar Amelia and touch the skull in her chapel that the sun actually sets, and the true nighttime begins. Story-wise, this is the moment when the hunt gets serious. The citizens have all shut their windows, and the only people brave or crazy enough to walk the streets are hunters like us. Since the first act is over, the game can also take the training wheels off and hit us with more challenging encounters and optional areas like Castle Canehurst. Regardless of which path we take, we all eventually wind up navigating the Forbidden Woods. This simply wouldn't be the same in the daytime. Getting lost in the woods is a common fear, and taking away the daylight only increases that tension. If you manage to make your way through the tangled trees and defeat the shadows of Yharnam, you'll arrive at Byrgenwerth College, where you'll dive into the lake and face Rom, the vacuous spider. This triggers Phase 3, the Blood Moon. If the second act is where the training wheels come off, then the climactic third act is where things go completely off the rails. We're thrust into the Nightmare Frontier and the Nightmare of Mensis, cursed areas on the fringes of reality where the most dangerous beasts reside. The Yharnam residents have all gone mad by this point, and if you didn't already increase your insight earlier in the game, it won't matter now. You'll still be able to see the massive Amygdalas crawling over the buildings in town. You can even fight one as an optional boss on the aforementioned frontier. Soulsborne games have multiple endings, and Bloodborne's debatable best one will see you survive the Blood Moon and reach the dawn. If you do all the necessary steps, you'll fight a secret final boss called the Moon Presence, which makes for a fitting climax to the moon cycles we've seen throughout the game. Defeating it ushers in the dawn, turning our hunter into a baby god and ending the hunt. We're not getting into the significance of this transformation or the deep lore of Bloodborne here. The takeaway is this: From Software took a stab at day-night cycles by telling a story that ran from sunset to sunrise. That sequence of events brings big changes to the setting and tone of the game, plus some more nocturnal and nightmarish enemies that only manifest as the story grows more maddening. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice did almost the opposite of Bloodborne when it launched in 2019. Bloodborne ran from dusk to dawn, but Sekiro starts in the morning and runs to the middle of the night. Well, after the tutorial at least. You gotta have your stealth tutorial at night. When the game really gets going, our hero Wolf sets out bright and early from the dilapidated temple. What follows is a wild day of samurai fights, invading armies, and magical palaces in the sky. Your overarching goal is to protect Kuro, the divine heir. He's an immortal child, and it's thanks to his blood that our hero can rise again after being defeated. That blood is also something that foreign nations and even Kuro's own guardians have fought over. One of those individuals is Genichiro Ashina. Just as Father Gascoigne gatekept the rest of Bloodborne, the Genichiro fight is Sekiro's first major test of mettle. If you can't deal with the Lightning Lord, you probably won't be able to get through the rest of the game.
There's no college like Bergenworth here, but this guy still really takes you to school.
Genichiro is a mandatory fight, but you can take on some of Sekiro's unskippable bosses in your own order. So the time of day will shift to afternoon whenever you defeat Genichiro or the corrupted monk. Then, whenever you beat the other one, you can fight either the folding screen monkeys or the guardian ape next. When 3 out of the 4 are down, the game moves into the evening. It's at this point that new vengeful spirit enemies start appearing across the map, depending on which boss you beat first. For most folks, it'll be the difficult Nightjar ninjas and fencers. Finally, you'll reach nighttime after beating the last of those 4 bosses and entering the Fountainhead Palace. There are no new spirits at that point, but the overall difficulty scaling does go up throughout the day and continue into the night. Now, that might seem like fewer and less meaningful changes than what Bloodborne did, but here's the thing. Bloodborne's critical path is pretty linear, even if there are lots of exciting optional areas to explore. The aforementioned Castle Cainhurst exists outside of the moon cycle, and the same goes for Sekiro's Hirata Estate flashback, which is always set during the same deadly night. Sekiro spreads out your objectives and gives you options of which to pursue first. I talked about this before in my video on the evolving maps of Soulsborne games. This player choice is the true next step in From Software's day-night evolution. Your boss order determines some of the enemy spawns, and the shifting times of day have a few different triggers instead of a singular plot point. It's subtle, but giving players that freedom was important for what From Software would do with day-night cycles next. In 2022, From gave us our first true open-world Soulsborne experience with Elden Ring. For the first time, players were free to roam basically the entire map from the start, taking on the tentpole bosses in whatever order they wanted, more or less. Maybe it's better to say the game funnels everyone into the same final act after moving through most of the map at their own pace? Either way, it's the most freedom the From Software fans have ever had by far. The Lands Between is a living world with its own rhythms, and the most noticeable one is a true day-night cycle. The sun and moon rotate at regular intervals, taking roughly 2 real-world hours to complete their full routine. So from an aesthetic standpoint, this is really important in establishing the Lands Between as a real kingdom that we can explore at our own pace. And just as the previous games had optional areas unaffected by these changes, Elden Ring has a whole underground that exists in a permanent state of night, yet with an impossibly starry sky above. Because the player is free to explore the overworld at their own pace, there aren't as many specific quest triggers based on the time of day, though there is one major exception. Your first opportunity to meet Ranni the Witch is at the Church of Ele at night. This kicks off a quest that runs the entire length of the game, including a specific ending. Ranni will also give you the Spirit Calling Bell during your first encounter. That's your ticket to summoning all those awesome spirit ashes.
Mimic Tier Gang, rise up!
Due to the open world nature of the game, you might not run into Ranni and wind up starting her quest or buying the bell from a merchant later on. It's not something you can truly miss, and the same goes for Elden Ring's other nighttime encounters. Enemy spawns change, as you might expect, but you can only encounter certain bosses at night. The Knight's Cavalry is one of them, but the name makes that pretty obvious. Bell-bearing hunters, death birds, and death right birds are the other ones that only come out once the sun goes down. I probably don't even need to say it, but those night bosses are tough. Difficult or not, these fights are the highlight of the nights in Elden Ring. As you travel from place to place, you've got to be on the lookout for all 4 of these foes. They love to ambush a Tarnished walking alone at night. So for the first true open world experience, From Software baked in a repeating day-night cycle that makes the world feel more alive, and sprinkled in optional encounters that make traveling at night as dangerous as you might expect. Good thing you can change the time of day every time you rest at a site of grace. And if you miss out on the church meeting with Ronnie, nothing is actually lost in the overall quest. There have to be contingencies for the different paths that players can take. All in all, Elden Ring saw From Software embracing a true day-night cycle with a Soulsborne spin, and it works really well. It's important to establish that, because once players know what to expect, that's when you can really mess with them. 2025's Elden Ring Nightreign was certainly a surprise when it was first announced, though as I talked about in a previous video, the squad survival direction of the game does line up with the co-op mechanics that Soulsborne games were already using. Nightreign is also a chance to totally shake up the pattern that the original game established. Elden Ring has a naturalistic day-night cycle that takes its time, but Nightreign is a short, relentless loop. You see, every expedition in this spin-off runs for 3 in-game days, assuming you make it through the night. Day 1 and 2 run on tight 15-minute timers, with demanding boss battles to close them out. Day 3 is reserved for a climactic clash with one of the Night Lords, and if you thought the earlier boss encounters were tough, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. The day-night cycle is heightened to a fever pitch in Nightreign. Not only do you have very limited time each day, but the map also shrinks due to the encroaching purple flames of night. You'll have access to the full map when you first drop in, so you can hit up churches, forts, castles, and everything in between. But you've still gotta hustle. That all changes as the night draws closer. Similar to Battle Royale games, the Ring of Flames cuts off parts of the map, forcing you into a random safe spot under the image of an Erd tree. Well, I probably shouldn't call it safe since that's where you end up doing your boss battles. The frantic nature of this loop isn't From Software's only experiment though. You see, this all takes place in Limveld, not Limgrave from the Lands Between in Elden Ring. The parallel world allows the studio to reach back into the past and surprise us with boss encounters from previous games, although you won't find anything from Bloodborne or Sekiro here. The latter makes sense, since the battle mechanics are so different. Bloodborne's bosses, on the other hand, belong to Sony.
You gotta love IP rights. Although legally speaking, we could still see an Armored Core.
This is a separate, multiversal world from the Lands Between, which means From Software can get a little kooky with the bosses without disturbing the continuity of Elden Ring proper. And that means that Nightreign can do something very special with its story. You see, Limveld is threatened by those aforementioned Night Lords, living embodiments of the night itself. Gladius, Noster, Maris, and the rest of the Night Gang mix things up mechanically from other Soulsborne bosses, but they also stand out as cohesive representations of the game loop. The time limit, the purple flames that close in, the ultimate encounter with each Night Lord, they don't feel like excuses for the kind of game From Software wanted to make. They're all harmonious. It's a marriage of mechanics and story that works really well, and might have only made sense in a spin-off. Also, it gives them an excuse to make things even harder, and you know the From Software sickos are all about that. Day-night cycles can be mundane. It's a real-life thing we experience every 24 hours after all. So it's up to any video game dev to take something so regular and make it worthwhile as a game mechanic. For me, From Software's evolution and experiments with this idea are as clear as, well, day. Bloodborne was the studio's first attempt, so the idea was mostly kept to an aesthetic. As the hunt grows more intense throughout the night, the moon cycle changes, moving into an otherworldly red that signals the arrival of creatures beyond what Yharnam clerics thought was possible. Sekiro is a similar idea, moving from morning to night. The difference is that there are variable triggers for the time changes, depending on which bosses you beat first. This also determines some of the enemy spawns in the back half of the game. This was a necessary step for From Software, as Elden Ring's open world demanded a classic day-night cycle that rotated regularly. With that came a greater opportunity to add enemies that only spawn at certain times. In fact, there's a whole category of night-only bosses. Plus, Ranni's quest can begin when the sun goes down, establishing more of a narrative link to the night. Of course, no story is tied to the night as closely as Nightreign's. Once the pattern had been established in Elden Ring, the spin-off could run wild with ideas that brought the night to life in completely new ways. It's a living threat here, embodied by encroaching flames and dangerous night lords. It's a clever mix-up that justifies a totally different game loop. The only question is, what's next? Now that we've seen From Software utilize day-night cycles in both established and offbeat ways, what can the team do to mix things up again? And why is my answer always Bloodborne 2?
Hey, thank you so much for watching this video, whenever you watched it. If you like what I'm doing here on Framework, please hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help me out an awful lot if you do. And if you want to check out what I've already cooked up, you can hit that link on the far left. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.